Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's episode, we're talking all about Superfractors. We were actually planning on talking about Superfractors before another Superfractor gate came out. And if you know what I'm talking about, that's great. If not, we're going to dive into it a little bit more in depth. But first thing, we have a few different people on the podcast today. We have Phil, Ty, Jeff, and me. My name is Scott, and we will be the ones chatting all about Superfractors, baseball cards, and everything else in between. So let's discuss our first topic. Very first thing, we have Superfractors from Topps Bowman Draft, right? Bowman Draft, one of the biggest products of the year, and everybody anticipates this release. And the high-end cards you want, obviously, are the one-of-one Superfractors. The autographs are worth the most, but the base first Superfractors are still worth a pretty penny. And recently on eBay, a seller posted about 12% of the print run of the Bowman Draft Superfractor set. And this is fishy because in order to pull one of those, you have to spend a massive amount of money. And it turns out that those were actually backdoored from the printing facility, along with some Panini one-of-ones, because they are printed Topps and Panini in the same facility. And it turns out that it's been a bigger issue than we realized. And Topps has done a good job of responding to this. They've actually responded by basically telling all grading companies not to grade them, refunding all the buyers who paid for them, and explain the situation. But I just want to pick everybody's brain on this and kind of dive into it further. Phil, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I guess it could have been a lot worse if, if this was something where, first of all, Mike Mahan did a great job responding. I don't know if it was an official statement yet, but he kind of filtered that through Mario from Twitter. Yeah. I mean, this is another scandal, right? And even if you are to divert the blame to one individual or a couple individuals that are over by the printing facility, I mean, it's still your suppliers, it's still your interested parties, it's still somebody connected to you as a company. There still should have been controls in place where this didn't happen, right? So either way, this is still very, very bad. Hopefully they're able to isolate this and track down all of the, the lineage of all the one-of-ones that have sold and any possible other cards he could have got his hands onto. They did say that it was like a subset of cards that were never intended to be packed out because they weren't laminated correctly. And the stamp, the one-of-one stamp, was on the back instead of the front. So at least there's that aspect of it where you can kind of differentiate it from the, the true Superfractors that are actually included in packs. And at least these aren't the authentic cards. And at least people that bought Bowman Draft aren't getting robbed of potentially getting those cards. But yeah, man, this isn't good. You wonder how much this actually happens. I know everybody's like probably thinks that it's just like one of those realities that you just can't get away from. There's always going to be X% of shady business. Backdooring's been something that's probably happened for a number of years. I just really hope that they're able to get their hands on all these cards. I hope that justice is served. I don't know if there's a prerequisite for something like this and somebody getting charged for something like this. It's not quite the same as the Superfractor scandal with Bowman Chrome, but this is certainly another blemish on Fanatics, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm showing my screen right now. Thanks, Phil. It's interesting because this has been around for a long time. If you go on eBay right now, and this is not me scrolling, by the way, this is a pre-recorded video from Mario's tweet. But if you actually go on eBay, you can find like Freddie Freeman, one-of-ones that aren't signed from Topps Finest that were basically just made as either replacements or as a preview product to make sure it looks good. So this isn't the first time these get out, but it is one of the first times that it obviously was attempted to sell unknowingly on modern products. Ty, what are your thoughts?
I just had somebody message me on Instagram 3 days ago asking me about my opinion on like 90s cards that are supposed to be serial numbered and are missing the serial numbers, and whether or not they're worth buying or what's the deal with those. And I, kind of gave a long-winded response, a little voicemail, but it's like, I don't mess with them. Like at best they're backdoored, and like, I don't want that. I don't want a backdoored copy that's not real. I want the real thing that came from a pack with a serial number, preferably on a lot of those 90s inserts authenticated by a grading company. And it's kind of a shame. Now I think this just sort of introduced risk into people's mind that shouldn't have to be there. At least when you buy the card for a fresh product like this, it should be the real deal. And now, yes, it's easy to tell between the two, but Michael Rubin was recently talking about now they've gotten Deloitte involved for auditing purposes. And as Phil alluded to, I guess they have a new control to put into place. Like I think the reason they gave was that these were copies that didn't meet the QC, specs. So they were supposed to be presumably discarded, destroyed. Well, if you have cards that are coming through and it's like, oh, these aren't going to pass QC, there needs to be like 2 people who have no history whatsoever together prior to working at the employer, both taking them to a shredder in the middle of the room where it's visible and destroying them like immediately. There shouldn't be any way for these cards to get, into somebody's hands and out the back door, stamped artificially and put onto eBay. So one thing that's not clear to me is what is the relationship and responsibility or the culpability between the printing facility and then Topps and Panini as manufacturers, because they obviously share a manufacturer in many instances. I don't know if it's for all products, but they definitely do for a lot of products. And isn't it the printer who's responsible here, and who's responsible for paying Deloitte and having the audit controls and all of those things? I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, it's probably not as bad as, multiple copies of the Superfractor being inserted into packs. At the same time, at least with that, we knew what the recourse was. You could go to Topps. This just makes you wonder, like, has this happened where somebody didn't screw up the serial numbering on other stuff in the past? How long has this been going on? What else might still be floating out there? So a lot of questions to be answered, but I was pretty happy with the response by Fanatics. I thought they had a strong response, much stronger than their now rivals in the hobby.
Yeah, I think that's a key here, that the response was strong and emphatic. Like Phil said, Mike Mahan, is it Mahan came out with that statement saying that all people who bought these fraudulent cards will be reimbursed and make sure it doesn't happen again. Yeah, it just makes you wonder. This is another case where greed is the only reason this really came out, because it was just that this guy had listed so many at the same time that brought some extra eyeballs to it. Well, how does he get a hold of all these? If he had just been slowly putting them out one at a time, how long would this have taken to uncover? What else would have happened? And again, then that goes back to what Ty had mentioned, how many times this happened before with other products that weren't so overtly different than the actual product. How many times that happened? So yeah, I feel like this is something that should be an easy fix. There should be controls in place to prevent this from happening. And maybe now this is just the catalyst that they need to do that. But I thought the response was really great from Fanatics. I think they learned a little bit about their slower response about the other Superfractor issue, although they did have very high payback amounts on the bounties for the people who turned the other supers in. But this was a really immediate response, and we'll see if it makes any changes. I hope it does.
I will say this is not the first time this has happened just for Topps, but even Pokemon. A couple months ago, early this year, there was a post very similar to this one where a guy had, if you don't know, the Umbreon alt art from Evolving Skies is very Umbreon V Max, I believe, alt art. It's very sought after. It's worth like $1,000 in a piece of 10, or it was at one point. I'm not as in touch with it now. But they had a box of like hundreds of them inside of the box. And he tried to sell them all off at a card show, which led to people finding out that he snagged a bunch of alt arts and rare cards from the printing facilities. So this happens, and it's one of those situations where there's money to be made. People are going to do shady things to make money, steal. I'm sure this isn't new in cards. It's probably happened in the history of every type of business and industry. But it makes me wonder, why are these sellers so stupid? Why are they so dumb? This guy could have gotten away with so much more. And is that concerning? Because maybe some people have been smart in the past and we just don't know about it. Phil, any thoughts around that topic?
I think the dumbest scams probably come out in December. And I'm like, my ears go up. I'm on high alert after Thanksgiving because I tend to be, not that people have successfully scammed me, but I think they come out more in droves during the holidays. People just get a little more desperate or try to take advantage of people that are desperate. The one thing that I'll add is that Mahan's response was strong. I think in the past, a lot of people have they've looked at what Fanatics has done, and it might not be a response to a crisis like this, but something that they do, and they compare it with Panini, and they're like, well, it's really impressive relative to Panini. I think at this point, we're at the place where everybody knows that Panini's a joke. So you no longer get the benefit of being compared to Panini. You get compared to yourself. So I think the standards go way up going forward, knowing that, the environment's changed. And you've already proved yourself to be more worthy of having professional licenses than Panini. Everybody gets that now. It's no secret. Now do a better job and don't measure yourself just against them, but hold yourself to just a higher standard. So, but I do agree. I think the response here was pretty good. It was pretty impressive, and I expect and hope to see more of that in the future.
I just wanted to show a photo of those Pokemon cards to show what this guy tried to get away with as well. Here's like a stack up here on the top of Gengar, VMAX alt arts that are worth quite a bit. Here's a bunch of Espeons, and you get the idea. So this is going to happen, and they have to do something. I've been to a couple of different sports card facilities, and they take security very serious. The ones I went to in regards to making sure you don't take anything in or out. And I'm sure these printing facilities have something similar in place, and it makes you wonder how it could have happened. But it is what it is. Topps did respond well. My only beef, I don't want to give Topps too much credit because at the end of the day, it still happened. And this is the second Superfractor related issue on Bowman release out of three. Out of the three there are, there's been 2 issues. So it's tough, and they are still learning, and they have proven to me enough that they do want to do the right thing for the hobby with, buying back, paying back, being able to get people who spent the money, lost money, that back to them, which I do appreciate. So any final thoughts on this topic, or are we good to jump to the next one? Jeff?
Just one final thought. This, as everybody has said here, this has been going on. It's reminiscent of the Upper Deck issue when they were printing thousands and thousands of extra Ken Griffey Jr. rookie cards, and those are being backdoored. People were showing up with boxes of entire runs of Ken Griffey Jr. So it has happened before. You just would think something at this level, there'd be a little bit better control over. Maybe
totally agree. So this is great. It leads into our next topic that I wanted to discuss. We had a viewer actually ask us to discuss Superfractors and their place in the hobby. If you aren't aware, if you're newer to the hobby, there are tons and tons of sets. And back when a lot of people collected in the 90s and even the early 2000s, generally there was a couple Topps products, a couple Upper Deck products, a couple Fleer products, and that was confusing for people when there was only 10 different products from different brands. But nowadays, we only have one company who produces baseball cards, but they have at least 60 to 70 sets every single year. And they're trimming the fat on that. They're trying to make that better, and I appreciate that. But either way, in every single one of these sets, they have one-of-ones. One-of-ones were also introduced in the 90s, and they had a serious premium on them as the Masterpiece one-of-one. But nowadays, we're seeing that one-of-ones are being diluted just as much as basically everything else. So I want to discuss Superfractors and their place in the modern hobby today. Let's go with you, Ty. What's your thoughts on it?
Superfractors are amazing. I've probably become more fond of them like every single day since I've been in the hobby. I really like Superfractors a lot. Aesthetically, they're just a really nice card. I'll give a little shout out to Cardinal Red Refractors, who tagged me today on a sick Pujols 2020 Stadium Club Chrome. Right on halfway through on the follow through, Superfractor tagged me and said that all our talk about Stadium Club, I don't know if it was from Day to Dive or from this, had inspired him, but it's definitely getting overdone. Superfractors are definitely getting overdone. So I went to Beckett, okay? And in Beckett, you can type in a player's name and Superfractor, and it'll give you presumably the right number. I think they've got pretty complete checklists on their website. So I typed in John Smoltz Superfractor. How many Superfractors total do you guys think come up when I type that into Beckett without cheating?
And this is playing days and current.
This is just all cards in existence for John Smoltz Superfractors.
I feel like I have to go high. I'm going to say 1,200.
I wasn't going to go that high because I feel like the majority of his time was played before the extreme proliferation of sets. So I was going to say more like 500.
I'll go with 870.
47. John Smoltz has 47 Superfractors, according to Beckett.
You got it, Ty.
No,
we got to edit this out. He made us look dumb, especially
Jackson,
Scott.
You made us look like idiots, Ty.
Jackson Holiday has 52 already. John Smoltz has 47. Jackson Holliday has 52. Albert Pujols has 190 superfractors. Wander Franco has 191. And Mike Trout has 454 superfractors. Ronald Acuna Jr., 7 years later, obviously, has 316 already. So they're printing more and more superfractors. I think the problem is they should stick to a certain set of products. We went through that list last week and looked at, all the different products that Topps releases now, and just limit the superfractor to specific sets, ones with some lineage, ones where it already previously existed, and then just stop overdoing it in every other product. I'm okay with the Bowman first, super base and auto. I don't really understand why they've started putting superfractors into product like Sapphire. That's not what the product is. So now you have a superfractor coming out of Sapphire that looks just like a Topps Chrome Superfractor. It doesn't look like a Sapphire card at all. So they're overdoing it. And I hate it when the companies do that, when they overdo a good thing. The one caveat is, if there's more of them and you really would like to have a superfractor of certain players in your collection, it's driving the price down in a lot of cases, at least in some sets, and maybe making it more accessible for people to have. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
So one thing I'll note on Topps Chrome Sapphire, I'm pretty sure not every player has 2 superfractors. There's just some in Topps Chrome who don't have superfractors, and so they get placed into Topps Chrome Sapphire. And then the ones that did have superfractors, I believe, have the other pink 1-of-1 that I can't pronounce. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case, where they don't have 2 true superfractors in today's sets out of those. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case. I could be wrong, but let me know there.
I think you might be wrong. I think one of my friends might have the Walker Buehler from each set, and they look exactly the same.
What year was
that?
What year was?
Well, 2018. But now I know what you're saying, and there are certain cards that are held out of like the Superfractor set, and I never knew why. So maybe that's why.
Because I know 16 for sure had both, and then 17 for sure had both because they were the box sets. 18 makes sense, and maybe it started in 2019, but I could be wrong. And if I am wrong, Phil, cut that out. But then we'll go from here. But I could be wrong. But overall, I will say, while we guessed high on superfractors, I think, fair or not, we are going to be lumping other 1-of-1s like foil fractors and these new versions into it. And so, there's only 400 Wander Franco superfractors, but that's insane when you think about it. But there are other 1-of-1s that do push that number up higher. So that's my only beef with superfractors, is they've kind of become less important to me. There's a guy who had a Mookie Bet superfractor on on Twitter, on X, and it did nothing for me. It just didn't do anything for me anymore. Those type of cards aren't as special as they used to be. They used to be showstoppers, and now they're just another dime a dozen in my eyes. Phil, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, interesting story I have. So PSA, I think, coined the term ultra modern that everybody uses now. This is when PSA had a backlog that was like 12 to 18 months. And they wanted to impose higher fees on ultra modern stuff. Like, basically, stop sending us your ultra modern stuff. We'll give you a break if you send stuff from like 2013, not 2018. So that's what they were getting, the Zions, the Jazz, etc. They ended up changing their definition about 6 months into it to, okay, we're not getting a whole lot of 2017 stuff. So ultra modern is now 2018 and up, versus it started out being 2017 and up. So I'm making that point now because Patrick Mahomes, he was a rookie in 2017. If you look at Golden Auctions right now, he's got about 24 different 1-of-1 rookies that are listed in auction. And most of these are from like off brands that I didn't even know existed. There's like probably 6 or 7 just from Spectra alone. So if it was an issue then it's certainly an issue now, and so much worse. If like everything's ramped up, depending on the set, a lot of sets, we were talking about this on the phone, Scott, Series 1 jumped up big time from 17 to 18. Topps Chrome jumped up, from probably 18 to 19, and then again from 20 to 21. And there were like multiple like increases in sets. And another thing I look at, not to go down to seemingly completely irrelevant rabbit holes here, but a lot of people after J-Rod's, the Logo Fractor and the Topps Chrome SP came out, a lot of people were wondering, like, what's going to be the key card of the future? What's the key card? And the only certainty that there was at the time for me was that there would be no certainty year one after those cards came out, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. People still wouldn't know. It's just too confusing. So what I'm trying to get to here is like the Superfractor issue and uncertainty and confusion is the same uncertainty that we're going to face with all other cards, with short prints, image variations, with number to 5 reds. It's going to be even much worse with all those other cards. So, and that frightens me a little bit, because whenever there's confusion, whenever you need to like provide context, or whenever you need to read a story to really understand something when it should really be clear cut. I mean, like if you're buying cryptocurrencies, you know, Bitcoin is like the gold standard, right? It's got the lowest downside risk. It's going to be the least volatile out of all of them. If you want a little bit more alpha, then maybe you go with Ethereum. With cards, I think that's one of the greatest concerns for modern, probably more so ultra modern, if you're to invest in these cards long term, is like, where do you even start? Where do you start? So I know I probably didn't go where you guys thought I was going to go, but yeah, Superfractor dilution is an issue. The fact that there's not clear hierarchies of Superfractors in most sets is an issue. And that's going to be even more of an issue when you start to compare those to the number to 5s. And then you start bringing in the 25s. And I know everybody likes true golds, but you've got cannibalization across that. And then not a clear hierarchy across sets often with that. Although I'd probably start with Topps Chrome, regular Bowman Chrome. You know, first would be before that probably, then Bowman Chrome. I don't know. That's even confusing, but I don't know, man.
I want to add that when we compare eras and we compare years, they are important. It doesn't feel like 2010 is that long ago, but it's been 13, 14 years. And a 2010 Topps Chrome Superfractor to me is significantly cooler and much more sought after than you're ever going to get from a 2024 product coming out next year, right? And so I do think, like, even if you compare the 60s to the 80s and to the 90s, those years make a big difference in regards to card values because there's good reason to it. I don't think all modern Superfractors are going to have this issue. I think there is going to be a specific year where the tables turned. And I do think, for me, and I say this all the time, it's probably anywhere between 2017 and 2019. Like in those 3 years, we saw a massive increase in production of sets and parallels to actually match the demand that started. So I do want to say, I do think everything prior to that, those cards are still really special and cool in my eyes. That's just my thoughts. Jeff, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, a lot to digest there. I feel like there is some confusion about a Superfractor versus a one of one, especially with all the different sets, and the Chrome stock versus the paper stock. So what they call what, and then you've got some sets that have both Chrome and paper in. I think that the one thing for me where it's diluted even further is having the Superfractors in the insert sets. So you might have Topps Chrome Superfractor of a player, but he might be in 4 or 5 insert sets from that particular year. So all of a sudden you've got 5 or 6 Superfractors now of Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna Jr. from any particular year, even just from one product. So I think if there could be some sort of streamlining, like Ty was mentioning, I hadn't thought of that, but that would be pretty cool if they would limit it to that. So maybe for the Sapphire, instead of doing any Superfractors, they do the Papa Shadera or whatever it is, and it still can be a one of one, but they limit the specific Superfractor to those sort of mainline sets. I think that'd be a really cool idea, Ty.
Yeah, Ty, what are your thoughts on everything so far?
I just think that I think less is more. The manufacturer shouldn't be. It should be really protective of the things that drive the most hype, not watering them down. Like there's ways to have another tier of highly sought after things and to increase print runs or diversify how they come out. We've seen downtowns now in football are just like completely overdone. I made a video about that last year, and from what I'm seeing this year, it's like even worse. For whatever reason, Panini opted to make parallels of downtowns in football, but not in basketball, and not in baseball, unless it's baseball. So sometimes you can't really wrap your head around those things. But when you take something that drives people toward a product, becomes one of your iconic, offerings. and then you just start overproducing them. Short term, people are getting really excited. Oh my gosh, we hit a downtown, or we hit a Superfractor, we hit a whatever. But then when they go to see on the secondary market that it's not going to be worth anything because they opened their product 2 months after it came out and there's already been 1,600 of them sold, that leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. It's like, I guess, yeah, it's cool that I hit this, but like I thought I hit something really awesome and it turns out I didn't, which is really confusing because 2 years ago it was awesome. It also runs the risk of potentially devaluing older versions of those cards the more they dilute it, because people no longer remember that they were even rare. And like, well, that's really cool, but they don't necessarily know that it was super rare at an earlier point. So that's kind of my thought on the whole thing. There's plenty of ways to get creative and have other really cool one-of-ones if you want to do that in a product. In general, one-of-ones are just being massively overdone now, and it kind of drives me crazy.
And the Juan Soto Platinum Parallel 101 is up on PWCC right now. I'm sure a few of you guys know that. And right now it's sitting at $12,000 with, I think, 3 days left. And I know it's going to end up going for at least 40. I think it will. But like, you look at, like, you wonder if the one-of-one fatigue is one of the reasons why it's not getting a whole lot of activity. Like, people forget, like, the Platinum Parallel is like one of the top cards to get, right? I have some other issues and gripes with the Platinum Parallel. I just don't usually think it looks nice, but that year all the parallels look nice.
Yeah,
I think. And that was one of the key cards of Soto. One of my friends is telling me in a thread that I remember when I thought that card was worth $300,000. You know, and now it's just people forget about its importance, and you wonder, even like the one-of-ones from staple sets, where there aren't a whole lot of different one-of-ones in flagship, are those going to get affected in the long term from all these other sets, one-of-ones and supers and pretty looking cards? I think for a collector, it's great. Just want to say that. For an investor in a specific player, somewhat of a nightmare.
Yeah, baseball cards are designed purely as a collecting asset. It's great. Like you said, Phil, it's fun to collect and find cool, shiny cards of players we care about. And that's awesome. Obviously, if you're buying cards and putting the big money into these cards, you do want them to maintain their value if you can. Like, just obviously that's your goal. But if you're ripping a retail hobby box and you pull one of the Topps update Witch Hat Parallel one-of-ones, you're going to be ecstatic. And that's what Topps is really going for. And they're probably doing a good job in that aspect, but it makes you wonder if it's shooting themselves in the foot long term. But my question for you, I mentioned this earlier. Do you think that there's going to be a specific year or a specific, is it 2020s forward that we look at differently versus the 2000s to 2010, 2020? Because they're very different. But do you think they'll ever be looked that way, or will that just be all of that mixed together because of people's perspective? What's your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, there definitely is a difference. Even now, people kind of talk about it like the pre-COVID boom. So I don't know if that's just an easy way to talk about pre-2020. Although, as you both have pointed out, were some significant jumps in both print run and interest in the hobby from 2017, 2018, and then again each of the subsequent years before then. So I don't know if there'll ever be one specific year. I think 2018, because of the incredible rookie class we had, that's really holding that year up as kind of a modern, ultra modern standard, at least. So I don't know if they didn't have that, then I'd probably say up to 2020 maybe, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Phil?
Kind of depends a little bit on the future. Like,
True.
I think a lot of people thought, like, I guess if people looked back 2 years ago and they knew that the prices of single cards, some of these iconic cards like Topps Chrome 2003 LeBron James PSA 10 rookie, like, okay, that's going to be a $5,000 card. Because of that, they'll have to print a lot less because the demand will have to be a lot lower. But I think what a lot of people didn't get right was that, well, there could still be a lot of demand for opening cards. And breakers are helping drive that, and with their own marketing efforts too. And they're still printing a lot. So I would have thought that there would be like a junk wax 2.0 period, like what you're saying, Scott, 2020 or 2019 through 2022 or 2021. And then they start to cut print runs drastically. But then Fanatics comes in with a goal of, 10xing the hobby, not maybe not a true goal, but at least what they're spinning to the public. Probably not one that they would believe themselves, even when they said it the first time, in my opinion. Maybe 2x. Maybe that's more realistic. And they probably won't do that either.
Is it pre-Fanatics and Fanatics era? Is that what it might be categorized as?
Fanatics screwed this all up. It could have been just a Junk Wax 2.0 and then just like back to reality. Now, who knows? Nobody knows how long this is going to persist for, is where I'm going. Like we don't know when it's going to stop.
Well, I mean, it's the perception.
To their benefit, they're selling product, I guess.
Like, but let's say it continues. Like, I don't think it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. I really don't, especially the way they're pushing the live platform and essentially gambling. It's gonna keep going for a while. But do you think the perception of cards before Fanatics took over will always have better light on them, or do you think it'll all just get mixed together?
No, I think it was already going in that direction. Like Phil said, it could have had a chance to alter it, but now it's just going to keep going in that direction. So if anything, depending what the future does, I mean, we're still seeing print runs go up to the moon. So then maybe you do look at 2016, 2017, something like that. But I guess it depends on the future. Yeah, if there's going to be any sort of reining in of that craziness. But if like Phil said, they're making money, that's the goal of the business.
Phil, you gonna say something real quick?
Yeah. I was gonna just add that we need to give Fanatics a little bit of credit, since we're talking about one-of-ones, that they have cut a number of sets this year.
Yes.
That, all else equal, would reduce the number of one-of-ones, or at least keep it somewhat the same versus the year before. So maybe, Scott, that'll be a topic for your next video. Have the number of one-of-ones gone up?
They did add some sets as well, as we're seeing.
Yeah.
A lot of Bob Ross, a few different Topps Chrome editions.
That's normal, though. I mean, every manufacturer has done that since 1992, to like introduce a new set and as like a novelty and see what sticks. And then sometimes they just do one-offs, which I don't have a problem with, like niche one-off products, in terms of just collector interest and things like that. Now, if they start rerunning Bob Ross product every year, I'd be like, come on.
Well, I mean, they did with Ben Baller. Did they come out with a Ben Baller this year, or is that gone finally?
I hope not.
It could be coming. We'll probably find out within the next week or so.
And I think I was going to say, yes, it's normal to add a few sets, even though they're talking about streamlining. Okay, adding a few sets, but to still not get the sets out that collectors want, like Stadium Club, that's kind of a black eye on the whole production.
I'm still confident Stadium Club will happen. I don't think they want money.
That'll happen, but yes, it'll be in 2024, where we'll be chasing the 2023 rookies again.
And I will say, Topps still is doing much better than Panini has ever done in that regard as well. Panini is still releasing sets of rookies from 2 years prior a lot of the time. One thing, we're running out of time. I do want to just ask you a question. So we're talking about eras and, how it's going to be perceived and all these different things. I actually just recorded, prior to this call, a video for my own other channel discussing Google Trends and baseball cards and other sports cards. Since 2004, what year do you think was the least searched for baseball cards? When do you think Google Trends shows baseball cards was the least popular, between 2004 and today? Jeff, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was out of the hobby for the majority of that time. I didn't get back in till 2017. So that's when I started searching for it again. I would guess, I don't know, maybe 2008.
Okay. Phil?
I'd go 2010. That's right when, that was before Trout debuted in Harper, and they made quite a splash. I'm thinking of like baseball cards were low, so I'm thinking of like what would be the low point for baseball as a sport too. So I would take like the average of those two would probably be somewhere close to 2010.
Okay, and Ty, I'll show it right after
2010. 2010 was going to be my guess.
Surprisingly, the lowest point for baseball cards was 2014, by far the lowest.
That was going to be my guess. Interesting.
2014 to 2016 was like the worst couple years for baseball cards. You could actually see all the way till the recession in 2008, cards were really popular and they dropped off a ton, but they had a spike with Trout, Harper, Strasburg, a couple other good players. And then it was just like the dark ages until we had COVID. There was actually a lot of momentum before COVID, but then COVID really helped it. But my point in showing that is I do think that's why that era is so interesting before it was really popular, because Topps was printing demand at that time. They didn't have the luxury to overprint. And so that's why I think that era might be viewed differently, is because realistically, no one was buying cards. At least I would say 80% of people in the hobby now weren't buying cards in that time frame. So
it was, I looked at basketball. It was 2009 and then basically tied for that September of 2013. But otherwise, so it's interesting that it doesn't really line up for those two.
Would you consider Mookie Betts a good buying opportunity? He's from 2014, Scott.
I don't collect Mookie Betts. I think he's a bum.
But you invest.
But yeah, so it is interesting. Other than that, we will have to see how it all plays out. I think all of our gut reactions, if we wanted to summarize it in a couple simple words, is yes, it's a problem. And I don't think all of us, well, that's not true. I'm personally not targeting Superfractors from this era really at all. It doesn't really interest me, even the players I care about. It's nothing that I feel like I'm going to miss out on, because I know next year there's going to be 15 to 25 more. And that's how I feel about it. So unless it's an amazing image, I could not care less myself. I know, Ty, you might feel very passionately the opposite way, but I do think that you're losing collectors because of this.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. All right. Any final thoughts before we end this episode? Okay, everybody, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, do all that good stuff for us. If you're on Spotify, thank you for listening. Please leave us a 5-star review, and we will talk to you soon. See ya.